Welcome back to the program. Our political panel now. Joining me from Brisbane is Labor frontbencher Graham Perrott and Liberal MP David Coleman is in our Sky News Centre. Gentlemen, thank you both for your time today. And just continuing on this theme of Iraq, I'm interested, David Coleman, your thoughts. Planes haven't dropped bombs yet, but they're ready to do that. They're very much looking at ISIL targets. Do you consider that it's fair to say that Australia is now at war in the Middle East?
Oh, look, Tom, I think the key point here is that we're part of a very widespread coalition to address the ISIL threat. That's entirely appropriate. We're combining with both the nations from the Middle East and from the West, and it's an entirely appropriate thing for us to do. We've obviously seen, unfortunately, Australians become involved in this conflict in the Middle East, and it's very important that we send a clear message that we're going to participate in the efforts to degrade ISIL.
Graham Perrott, Labor's given its support to this action. Do you think the terminology is important, and would you consider this effectively Australia being at war?
Well, look, I'll leave that for the military historians and the like. It's clear that these Daesh terrorists are doing their best to destabilise the region, and with their horrible agenda, it's impossible for right-thinking nations to just sit by and let that happen.
Okay, well, turning to a focus back home, obviously, and the terror threat back home. Part of that have been these new anti-terror laws, and I'd like to take you to a couple of them and go through them briefly. The first one of those to do with anti-torture powers, the fact that the ASIO is going to get increased power. There was debate about torture, and straight away the government said they would put an anti-torture clause in there. So we're hearing that ASIO, our security agents, will not be able to torture people. That will remain, as it always has been for Australia, illegal. But at the same time, we've got another law coming in that's going to mean that all people, journalists, whistleblowers, whoever you like to include there, will not be able to disclose information about special intelligence operations if it's not authorised information. David Coleman, does this mean if there's an authorised or a special operation that's sensitive in some way, a journalist, a whistleblower finds out there has been torture, which is illegal, they then can't report it?
Well, Tom, look, I think these laws are entirely appropriate. Special intelligence operations, as you know, generally involve counter espionage-type activities where people are undercover at immense risk to their lives, and we did need to strengthen these laws to make it clear that people, when ASIO was involved in such an activity, that it is not appropriate to be publicly disclosing that.
But could there have been at least a public interest test in there somewhere? Because as it stands, it's pretty much a blank slate. For anything to be declared operationally sensitive, nothing can be reported on.
Well, look, Tom, I think there's obviously always, on the one hand, you have we have a desire to protect civil liberties, and on the other, a desire to protect the Australian people from the terrorist threat. My view very strongly is we need to err on the side of protecting against that threat. The reality is that if our laws aren't strong enough to give ASIO and other agencies the tools that they need, the last thing we want to occur is for a terrorist incident to happen. And so if we can sensibly reduce the likelihood of that occurring, including through these laws, we should do so.
Graham Perrott, some MPs have been saying reportedly that they weren't given enough time to pore over the details of these. Is there anything you've discovered in reading you're at all concerned about? Are you entirely happy with the laws that have passed so far, and perhaps some of the other ones that are set to be presented to the Parliament as well?
Well, if we can separate those questions, the first set of laws introduced by the Abbott government actually reflected a process started under the Attorney General, the Labor Attorney General Roxon, continued under Attorney General Dreyfus. So these had been in the pipeline for a long time. They had community consultation. Both Labor and coalition governments had gone to stakeholders to get as much input as possible. And this was about updating legislation that went back to the 80s, effectively. So I'm reasonably happy with the end result for that first wave of legislation. The next bit of legislation obviously is more important to get right. And there's no crazy rush to get these things introduced. The Attorney General has flagged some urgency, but the reality is there's sunset clauses there that don't kick in until I think the end of next year from memory. So let's get the legislation right. It's important whenever we're talking about interfering with, you know, the liberties of a journalist, like a reporter like you, Tom, that we get the legislation as correct as possible and as considered as possible.
What about this foreign fighters aspect of it, Graham? Do you have concerns, some of them that have been raised in terms of the no-go zones? What sort of reasons will be given or accepted for being in these zones to avoid prosecution? And also whether or not evidence can be presented from some of these areas, countries such as Iraq or Afghanistan, Syria, wherever it might be, where there have been corrupt regimes previously, that Australia is going to accept overseas evidence, if you like.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Let's hasten slowly. Let's make sure the details are correct, and I think there is a committee process there. I heard some evidence from Penny Wong put forward to that committee on Friday, so there is no crazy rush. Let's make sure we get it right, because you know, Australians are connected to 200 countries around the world. They'll have many reasons for going back to other countries. And obviously there is the capacity to put forward a defence if they are accused of something, and let's hope that justice would always prevail. But there's also the need to make sure that Australians are safe, and that's why this legislation is being rolled out.
Yeah, and Tom, if I could just add on that, as you know, the existing laws do often make it quite difficult to admit evidence in relation to foreign activities. Some of those activities are of great threat to Australians, and it is important that we make changes to our laws to reflect those risks. I think if you talking about the power of the Foreign Minister to declare an area somewhere that would be captured within these laws, if you take a place like Raqqa in Syria, for instance, I think it would be entirely appropriate that a place such as that be added to this list. If someone is visiting there for legitimate reasons, then that's entirely okay, but we do need to strengthen our laws here to protect our people.
Okay, we'll wait and see a bit of that detail. The other big question, sorry Graham, I'm just going to move on quickly, because the other big question is how to pay for all of this. David Coleman, the Finance Minister, was on Sky News yesterday. He was asked about paying for the war. He was asked about taxation measures. He said he wouldn't rule anything in or out. Are you ready to campaign perhaps for a national security tax or levy?
Oh, what I'm campaigning for, Tom, is for Labor to pass our budget savings measures. I mean, let's be clear, this is the cast and crew that got us into the budget mess. It's now the cast and crew that is blocking us from getting these changes through. And not only that, this is the good part, Tom, they're actually blocking their own measures too, because there's about $5 billion of budget savings measures that they champion in government and they now won't vote for. So the way to fix the budget situation is to get on the savings.
On paying specifically for the Iraq conflict, would something like a levy be appropriate, do you think?
Well, Tom, the cost of the Iraq conflict is tiny relative to the savings that can be achieved through passing our budget savings measures. There are some tens of billions of dollars of savings that are on the table, and as you know, this additional expense will be substantially, less than $1 billion. So it is. There's a simple way to get the budget back on track, and that's to get on board with the government's agenda and pass the budget savings.
Graham Perrett, we've heard plenty of times that Labor are not going to support those savings and they will present their own. I'd like to put to you whether or not Labor might present some of their own from government, specifically the FBT changes, specifically on tax breaks for owning a motor vehicle connected to work, and also superannuation tax, a tax on people when their super earns more than $100,000. Are we going to see these ideas again put forward by Labor, perhaps promoted again, a case made while in opposition as alternative savings?
Well, we've certainly prepared to sit down and negotiate with the government in terms of the fair income savings, but the reality is the coalition mugged the people of Australia after the election with these complete surprises, complete shocks to what they said before the election. So if they want to talk about real savings, we were happy to sit down. We've got some measures there in terms of going after international businesses that aren't paying tax. But you know, don't attack the pensioners. Don't hand out $100,000 university fees for students. Don't go after the sick, putting a tax on the sick by going to the doctor and putting a $7 co-payment fee on. We'll always fight against those things.
What about just quickly the FBT changes within cars? I mean, when Labor proposed that, there were car dealerships saying they'd go out of business. At least now you've got the car industry going anyway. Does this make it more palatable for Labor to put it forward again?
Well, let's have a look at those. I remember the tears from those opposite when they were in opposition, you know, crying about the taxes on cars. I remember, you know, Tony Abbott voting against a small contribution for people to rebuild Queensland after Yasi and the floods. So I remember their hypocrisy. I look for it, but nevertheless, we believe in the national interest, and we'll always sit down with and do the right thing by the people of Australia, based on the circumstances that are presented.
David Coleman. Very quickly, those changes on FBT, essentially should the taxpayer, with the car industry gone, be propping up car dealerships? Is that a good use of money?
Oh, look, we didn't support those changes, as you know, Tom. But I mean, you know, Labor has zero credibility on this topic. They got us into the mess, and now they're trying to stop us from fixing it, including their own savings, deficit. Tom. And that is just doesn't make public policy sense.
OK, we are going to have to leave it there on a note of strong disagreement. So it is. But thank you, David Coleman and Graham Perrott, for your time today.
Thanks,
thank you, of course, for watching Lunchtime Agenda. And to stay with us.